begin with this dhyana sloka, the verse on the meditation. Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradhidam Puranamunina Madhye Mahabharatam Advedamradavashinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayinim Ampatvam Anusandathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini. O Bhagavad Gita, with which Partha was enlightened by the Lord Narayana himself, and which is incorporated in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa, the Blessed Mother, the destroyer of rebirth, showering down the nectar of Advaita, and consisting of 18 chapters about tea, O Bhagavad Gita, loving mother, I meditate. Now, yesterday we were dealing with the 69th verse of the second chapter. It is something of a paradox, apparently. Yanisha sarvabhudanam yasyam jagrati samyami tasyam jagrati bhudani sanisha pashyuto. What is night for the enlightened person is day for the ignorant. And what is day for the ignorant is night for the enlightened. The idea is this. Here night represents something which is irrelevant, non-existent, the relative, something that's with transcendence. And day represents the lights, the absolute reality. The highly evolved spiritual seeker looks upon the world and all its sense pleasures as fleeting entities, things which come and go, practically non-existence. So far as he or she is concerned, these things are of no consequence. So it's like night for them, for the highly evolved person. Now, what is day for him or her? For the highly illumined, spiritually evolved person, Atman, Brahman, the absolute reality, or you may call God, is day. That's a real for him or for her. Similarly, for the ignorant person, God is non-existent. God is night. He is blind towards the highest spiritual idea. He is not awake at all. He is blind towards spiritual ideas. So, God or Atman is darkness or night or non-existent for him. And what is day for him? This body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, this world, and all the sensory pleasures are the realities. They constitute the absolute reality for him. Now here we come across a kind of an evolution in our concept of the absolute reality and life as a whole, and also an evolution with regard to our attitude towards world. As I said yesterday, for the primitive person, for a person who thinks body is only reality, this external empirical world consisting of sensory pleasures is the only reality. Matter is only reality. There is nothing beyond that. Now for such a person, Atman is non-existent. So he is wide awake to this world. He is blind towards spiritual ideas, but he is wide awake to this world. He is sleeping with regard to the highest spiritual idea, with regard to God. But this ignorant person, the primitive, unevolved person, is wide awake towards all the sensory pleasures. Now, as I said yesterday, there is an evolution. At the most primitive level, world is only reality. At the most advanced level, world is non-existent in the sense that it is not absolute reality. It is not absolutely real. It is only relative for the highly evolved person. For such a person, Brahman or Atman, the supreme consciousness, or from a devotion point of view, God alone is only reality. You can find such ideas. See, yesterday I was reading a well-known verse, Nicholson's translation of some of the Sufi poems. It says, "This is the state of the gnostic. Even when he is awake, God has said, thou wouldst deem them awake while they sleep. He is asleep day and night to the affairs of the world." A mystic, a spiritually evolved person is deep asleep with regard to the affairs of the world, but is wide awake with regard to God and the divine spiritual ideas. So, but between these two, there is one stage which I referred to yesterday, the intermediary stage. If you ask any scientist, any intellectually evolved person, a philosopher, he won't believe that the world that we find today is eternal. I already gave the 3 criteria for judging anything which is absolutely real. It should be beyond changes. It should be beyond time, space and causation. And it should be experienced without any change. As I say, in the 3 states of human experience and cognition. Means waking state, the dream state and the deep sleep stage. Atman is only reality. The world certainly is relative. So, for a scientist, for a philosopher, the world certainly is not eternal. But he may not be aware that there is something which is eternal. The world is certainly not absolutely real, but it is certainly not absolutely unreal, because we live in the world, we experience it, we are part of the world. So it is not absolutely unreal, but it is certainly not absolutely real. So it becomes indefinable, it becomes indescribable. It goes beyond definition, beyond explanations, beyond words, it goes beyond verbalization, as we call it. Now these are the 3 stages. Now, in other words, our concept of world and our concept of our life and our concept of the absolute reality, God also evolves. The primitive person thinks God is living in a temple or a church or a place of worship. And if he performs some external rituals, God will be happy. He can propitiate God. And he can do whatever he wants. He draws a line of demarcation between God and creation. The most evolved person, the most highly evolved spiritually perfect person, looks upon the whole creation as an expression of the divine. He doesn't see any line of demarcation, any differentiation between creation and creator. Yesterday I gave examples of 2 types of devotees. The highest evolved, the one who sees God's presence in all beings and who experiences the presence of all beings in God. And then there are others who are just about to reach that stage. At the lowest primitive level, there are those who will worship God, pray to God, and thinks that he can do whatever he wants with the world and people around him. Archayameva haraye pujam cha sraddhaye hade nachatat bhakteshu chanyeshu yak karodis prakritaha prakritasa udakritaha. There are 2 versions. The translation is this. He prays to God, he worships the Lord in the temple or a church or a place of worship. Everything is mechanical for him. Religion is something extremely formalistic for him. And then when he comes out of the place of worship, he is in a different world. But the highest evolved person, for him or for her, the whole world is temple. God is omnipresent and immanent. Every act becomes an act of worship. Every word becomes a prayer, and every thought becomes a meditation. This is the highest level. That's why Sri Krishna says, for such a highly evolved person, the world in total darkness, means he is above the world, is asleep towards the world. But at the same time, he is wide awake towards the divine reality that is all pervading. Now, you find a very interesting story which gives a graphic illustration of how we evolve in our concept of life and also in our concept of the absolute reality or God. How we evolve in spiritual life. The story comes in the Tattwamayanandaji, which is a part of Krishna Yajurveda, one of the Vedic texts. I won't give an elaborate background to the story. The story is that of a small boy. His father was a great ritualist, those who believe that external rituals constitute the essence of religion and spirituality. This man was performing Vedic rituals. His name is Vajasrava, that's his name. The boy's name is Nachiketa. He's the hero of the text, Tattwamayanandaji, which is in the form of dialogue between the Lord of Death, who appears to be a great teacher, and Nachiketa, a small boy, a disciple. So one day his father was performing external rituals. And then he noticed, instead of giving away good cows, the father was distributing old, aged cows which can't eat grass, which can't drink water, and which can't give milk. That's how the Upanishad describes the cows. You wanted to make a show of giving away gifts. So the boy approached him and asked him, to whom are you going to give me? That's a question. Now in those days, the son of the family so the children constituted the wealth of the family. And this man had only one son. So are you going to give me away anything? Maybe he was like little child in his pranks, he asked this question. The father got angry. He could not tolerate the pranks of the child. I'm going to give you to the Lord of Death. It's a mythological story. There's a great, deep spiritual message behind the story. Now the boy wanted to make sure that what his father said came true. So he started his journey to the Lord of Death. He reached there. The Lord of Death is Yama, that's the name of the Lord of Death. Y-A-M-A. He was absent, he had gone out somewhere. When he got back on the third day, Yama, the host, the Lord of Death, asked the boy, oh, you have been waiting for me for 3 days without food. That I am very sorry, I could not treat you properly. As a compensation, you can ask for 3 boons. I shall give you 3 boons. These 3 boons is they constitute a graphic description of the evolution of human concept of God, absolute reality, or life, whatever you may call it. The first boon that boy asked is this: when I get back to my home, my father should not get angry with me, like his child asking for chocolate or candy. That's the first human need. Everything should be all right in this world. Harmonious family, love, affection among the members of the family, enough to eat, means enough wealth, everything. All domestic needs fulfilled. This is the first aspiration of human life. The verse is this: Shanta Sankalpa Sumana Yadhasyat Vedamanyu Gautamoma Abhimurtyu Tut Prasishtama Vivade Prasida Edatrayanam Prathamam Varam Grini. This is the verse, the translation is this. The boy asked the boon, the first boon, when I get back to my home, my father should not scold me. You should not get angry with me. And everything will be alright in my home. The first human aspiration is everything should be alright in our domestic life. We must have enough money in the bank, we must have a secure job, we must have social security. All these constitute the first stage of human aspiration. But this boy was quite an intelligent one, so he could see that, wealth and all other material wants may be fulfilled, but they are not everlasting. All rich people are not happy, and all people who are healthy are not necessarily happy. So he asked for another boon, the next boon. After my death, what am I going to do? This wealth won't last beyond my death. You please give me a boon that will guarantee a happy life after death. That's why, sometimes, the next stage of human aspiration, when we have all the material wants fulfilled, then we think of, what is going to happen to me? Even an agnostic or an atheist sometimes starts donating money, doing philanthropical work. That is an attempt to go beyond the empirical, beyond the present, beyond this world. Not that that person may believe in God or afterlife, but the idea of doing something good for others, something good for the world, something which is not necessarily related to happiness in this life, is an attempt to go beyond the present, the empirical. So this boy asked for the next boon. After death, I should be able to enjoy life for a long time in heaven. Sattvam agnim surgam adheshu mrityu prabruhitam shattadhanaya mahyam sargaloka amrutam bhajanta edatrayanam ditiyam varam vrine. This is the second boon. Edadidiyena vrine varena. This is another version of it. Just I am quoting this verse because that may perhaps help you to locate the original verse in the Kathopanishad. The second verse is this, the second boon. Please teach me that Vedic ritual, the religious ritual, which will ensure that after death I will be able to enjoy long life in heaven. Yama, the Lord of Death, immediately granted that. Now the next boon is very, very profound and relevant from the spiritual standpoint. Can we look beyond heaven? Spirituality begins when you look beyond heaven. Heaven is nothing but an extension of all our material aspirations in this life. After all, most of us have read descriptions of heaven in different traditions. In heaven, everything is very happy. Heaven is nothing but an extension of all that we can think of in terms of material happiness in this life. Now the third boon is this. The boy asked a question. Some people are of the view that with this life, everything comes to an end. And some other people think there is something beyond this life. When we die, that's the end of the road, according to some people. There's something beyond this body. And according to some other people, this life is only a comma or a semicolon, not a full stop. Even after death, something continues to exist. That something should be something other than this body. other than all that we have got in this life. It should be eternal. It should be something which survives body and all other associates related to this body-mind complex. Please teach me that science, the supreme science of Atman, the eternal, the science about the Atman, the science about the infinite, the science about the everlasting absolute reality. Ayam prede vichikitsa manushi astityege na ayam asti vichayege edad vidya manusishtastayaham varanam esha varastrutiyaha. This is the verse in the Kathovanisha, in the Krishna Yajurveda. The Upanishad says, Nachiketa is asking for the third boon. Some people say, when we die, everything is over. Some people say, no, something continues to exist. You are the one who is the fittest teacher to teach me the supreme science of the infinite, about the infinite. And in answer to this, Yama tried to test Nachiketa's fitness, whether the little boy was a fit recipient, student, who is competent to learn this great spiritual truth. When he became convinced of Nachiketa, the boy's fitness, then Yama taught this. I quoted with Atmanam Rithinam Vidhi, Sariram Rithamevacha, I quoted 2 days back, twice. So it comes in this Upanishad. Now Yama, in answer to this, teaches this supreme reality, which is beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, beyond all the material comforts, the infinite everlasting reality. It is immanent, it is residing in the minutest of the minute. It is also existent in the grandest of the grand. Anoraniyan Mahato Makiyan Atma Sijintoha Nikitam Khaya Tamakradu Pasyati Vita Shogaha Dhadu Prasada Mahimanam Atmanaha. This is the verse. Anoraniyan means it is present, this absolute reality, Atman, it is present, it is the immanent principle in the minutest of the minute. And it is also existent, it is also present in the grandest, in the most sublime of the most sublime. It is the all-pervading, it is the omnipresent, the immanent, the transcendental reality. You can have this experience when you lead a pure life, when you sublimate all your actions into yoga by performing them all with total unselfishness. When you achieve complete purity of mind and intellect, you can feel the presence of this reality within you. Now here you can see 3 levels of evolution. In a way, it is true, Bible says God created man in his image, his own image. It is also true that man creates God in his or her own image. Our concept of the absolute reality very much depends upon our own spiritual and cultural evolution. Now, in the next verse, in the 70th verse, there is a verse, Apuryamanam Acharapadishtam Samudramapa Pravishandiyadut Tattut Kamayam Pravishandhi Sarve Sa Shantim Apnoti Na Kama Kami. That is the 70th verse. As I said yesterday, there is the picture, the imagery of a vast, mighty, peaceful ocean. And innumerable rivers empty their waters into this ocean. If we consider ourselves to be this body-mind complex, then we are becoming small ponds and small pools of water. If we identify ourselves that we are the Atman, then we are becoming a mighty ocean. If we think of ourselves as this body, this psychophysical mechanism, this body-mind complex, then even a very insignificant problem will create ripples, turbulence, disturbance and conflicts in our mind. But if you look upon ourselves as the Atman, the supreme reality, the all-pervading reality, then even a big crisis will not be crisis for us. Big problems will not be problems for us. In a small pool or a pond, even a small river can create disturbance, waves and tides and landslides. But in mighty ocean, if all the rivers in the world, the mightiest rivers in the world, the Mississippi or the Brahmaputra or the Ganga or the Volga, the Nile, if all the mighty rivers empty their waters into the ocean simultaneously, the ocean will not be disturbed at all. There will be no tides, no waves, no landslides. So that's why I said yesterday, we are what we think ourselves to be. If we can look upon ourselves as the all-pervading reality, then even a mighty crisis will be only a small whirlpool. But if we look upon ourselves as this body-mind complex, then even a small problem will be like huge tsunami. It creates overflowing of the water body, it creates tides and waves and ripples and disturbances. So, in the 70th verse, Lord Krishna advises us to be like the mighty, peaceful ocean, which remains calm and quiet. The ocean doesn't invite the rivers to empty their waters. The ocean doesn't reject the waters that the rivers empty into it. It remains as a witness, the subject, the non-participating subject, the non-participating witness. Similarly, in our life, if we can look upon all that happens around us, without identifying with them, without participating in the drama of life, as a witness and as a subject, if we can remain non-attached, then our mind will be calm and quiet. At the experience level, this becomes natural. But this can be cultivated by reading these scriptures. As I said earlier, Mahatma Gandhi used to turn to the pages of Gita. As a child, turns to its mother for consolation and help. And it is said that he used to meditate upon these 18 verses, 55 to 72, 72nd verses. Because even intellectual understanding, even thinking of these verses and their implications and meaning will give us an idea that this is an ideal, a goal that we must aspire for, we must try to reach. That itself will put us on the right track. That's the practical benefit of these verses. Now, in real life, how this happens, that should be explained in this context. We already read in the previous verse, this Yanisha sarvabhudanam tasyam jakriti samyami yasyam jakriti bhudani sanisha pashyuto. So if we are not aware of the supreme truth, we are in a state of deep sleep. There is a verse in the Mandukya Karika, Anadi Maya Suptu Yada Jiva Prabuddhide Ajamanidrima Sopnam Advaita Buddhide Tata. This is the verse. Anadi Maya Suptaha. Now, the author of this great book, Mandukya Karika, is Tota, who lived around maybe 6th or early 7th century AD. Yada Jiva Prabuddhide Ajam anidram aswapnam advaidam buddhide tada. The idea is this. Generally speaking, those who are not interested in spiritual ideas are in a state of deep sleep. So when they awake, they don't get a new knowledge. What happens is, so long they were keeping their eyes closed, now they open their eyes. As an illustration, there is a very very touching description of how we must proceed on our spiritual life. In the Chandogya Upanishad, that 6th chapter, where the great statement Tattwamasi is discussed, Tattwamasi Vakya Vichara, Uddara, like great sage, is expounding the concept of the philosophy of Advaita, Tattwamasi, thou art that, the great statements, to his son and his also disciple, Shvetaketa. 9 times he repeats, but I am not going to those details. But there is one interesting and very relevant illustration there. How we suddenly get a new light in our spiritual life, how we must proceed, that is explained here. Think of a forest, and there's a narrow path. It's semi-dark in the evening. It's a narrow path. A traveler is passing through this narrow road, and he happens to be caught by a band of robbers, professional robbers. They catch hold of him, they assault him, and they drag him away from the main road, blindfolded, and tie him to a tree. Now, this traveler, the condition of this traveler is similar to the condition of a spiritual seeker. The robbers are the temptations, the tyranny of the senses and mind. The senses dragging the mind all the time in different directions. Okay, now the robbers catch hold of him and they tie him to a tree and they go away. Now what does he do? If the traveler simply sits quiet, making no noise, then he will never be liberated, because he is tied hand and foot to the tree. He is practically imprisoned. But if he is a wise man, he will make some noise. Maybe he will try to invite the attention of some other passers-by who are taking the same road in their journey, expecting that they will come to his rescue. So he makes a lot of noise. See, I am caught, I am assaulted by the robbers, I am tied to this tree, please come and help me. Sometimes some passengers or some travelers, other travelers, taking the same road, may listen to him and become compassionate like a good Samaritan, and may, out of pity, go to him, will search out where the sound is coming, find him out, untie and liberate him from this bondage. And then this man may ask this compassionate traveler, I am coming from this particular place. In the Chandogya Upanishad, he says he is from Gandhara Purusha, I mean he is coming from a particular place called Gandhara. Gandhara is actually the place of Kambu. In those days, Afghanistan was part of the cultural unit of India in the 3rd or 4th century millennium. So this man tells this compassionate traveler who comes and unties the cord, well, I am coming from that place. How can I return? How do I find my way back to my home? If this traveler is a very compassionate person, and he is familiar with the terrain, with the route, so he will take this road and then you will reach a junction where four roads meet. Then you can ask somebody else, and then you should take another road, and slowly, gradually you can get back to your home. Now, who is this compassionate, kind-hearted traveler who unties him? Is the Acharya, the teacher, the spiritual teacher. And the poor traveler who is ambushed, who is assaulted, who is robbed, is the average spiritual seeker. The average spiritual seeker should have a strong desire for liberation. When he is assaulted by the robbers and it is tied to the tree, he should not keep quiet. I am imperfect, and I am quite happy here to be bound, to be imprisoned. He should not think that way. So he should have a strong desire for higher life, for spiritual enlightenment. And then he must try to read, he must try to meditate, or he should try to seek out fellow spiritual pilgrims, finding places where spiritual topics are discussed, where meditation or any kind of spiritual practices are taking place. He must go to such places. And then he will come across somebody who may give him direction to go beyond. So, when they're coming back to the story, if that poor traveler remains quite happy when he's tied to the tree by the robbers, he will not get spiritual liberation. So he should make some noise, then only the traveler, the compassionate fellow travelers taking the same road will come to him and help him out of this dilemma. Now again, the compassionate traveler, the Guru, the Acharya in this context, he may untie him, he may take him to the main road, because the robbers have blindfolded him before taking him to the interior forest, before tying him to the tree. So he doesn't know how to come back to the main street. So a good teacher will take us to the spiritual path. So this compassionate traveler removes the blindfold, directs him to the main road, and then tells him, well, you take this road, this path. Then after a few miles you will reach junction. You should seek other people, use other people's help. You should get some instruction from others, fellow travelers. Which road should I take to get back to my home, my hometown? Similarly, after getting instruction from a teacher, we must continue reading, we must enrich our spiritual culture by reading books, as I said yesterday, Holy Company, Mahapurusha Samsrayaha, as I said yesterday, elaborately explained. We must keep in contact with holy thoughts and spiritually helpful ideas by reading good books, discussing, by mingling with fellow spiritual seekers. That will help us to get back to our spiritual destination. It's a famous illustration in the Chandogya Upanishad. Those who are interested may read the 6th chapter, where from 8th Brahmana to 16th section, there's a long description of the instruction of highest spiritual experience. Tattwamasi Mehara, that is being expounded in this section, the Chandogya Upanishad. That's why Shankaracharya makes a statement here. Sa shanti moksham apnoti na itaraha kama kami kamyante iti kama vishayaha tan kamayidum shilam yasya sa kama kami na eva prapnoti ityartha. Shankaracharya makes a statement. So to be able to reach that kind of complete and absolute tranquility and peace of mind, you should try to remain completely non-attached to the sense objects and also to the senses. If we are attached to the senses and sense objects, we can never reach this ultimate peace of mind. So we must try to be a big ocean, not a small pond. If we look upon ourselves as this body, this human being, this psychophysical mechanism, then we are attached to one individual, a group of individuals. Our vision is limited to the immediate circumstances, a small canvas. But if we look upon ourselves as the all-pervading universal reality, even this outlook or even constant reading of scriptures which expound this idea may not have reached that state, the experience level, but even an intellectual revision of these ideas gives a lot of consolation. So a big crisis, a big dilemma will appear to be a small problem that we can easily confront. When we become stronger, the problems appear to be small. When we become very weak, even a minor problem appears to be a big dilemma or a big crisis. So that's a relative means dimension of problems and solutions. Yes, now we will go to the 71st verse. Vihaya kaman yas sarvan pumam saradi nispraha nirmamo nirahankaraha sashanti madhigacchati. The literal translation is this: the spiritual seeker who has given up all desires and moves without any sort of longing and any sense of mind means egotism, selfishness, hankering for material benefits. All these are problems. So a spiritual seeker should try to become completely free from this. Here also we must remember, as I said yesterday on many occasions earlier, it is not deliberate or artificial suppression or starvation of the senses that is implied here. It is, what is implied, what is emphasized here is the ability to look upon the world and all other worldly associations with total non-attachment. Because artificial suppression or starvation of the senses or desires will not create problems, will not solve problems, will only create more problems. Sri Krishna is very emphatic on that, on this point. In many slokas he has stressed this point. From a psychological angle, we can say what is implied is a sublimation of the senses and sense desires. If we can think of a high noble goal, as I said yesterday, very high ideal, before being established in action without desire, in action without any motive, if we can think of a high, big, sublimating ideal, that's helpful, because that helps us to focus our energies and aspirations in one direction. But it should be helpful in spiritual life. Something good for ourselves, something good for others. That will ensure that we are on the right track. And again, here the point is Vihaya Kaman, giving up all desires. To be able to give up all desires, or rather to be able to remain non-attached to desires, one should associate with people who have practiced this freedom from desire. As I said, freedom to the senses leads to spiritual slavery. Freedom from the senses leads to spiritual freedom or liberation. Senses take us away from freedom and take us to slavery. But freedom from the tyranny of senses takes us towards spiritual liberation or spiritual freedom. So here there is an interesting verse. It's a very famous statement. You may, I don't know, some of you must have heard of this. A famous German work is called Theologia Germanica, written around 1300 AD by a priest who belonged to the Teutonic Order. And it is said that this book highly inspired the great reformer Martin Luther. He was an anonymous person about whom we don't know much about. But he says, this author, the Teutonic priest, he says, on this sort must we cast all things from us and strip ourselves of them. We must refrain from claiming anything for our own. When we do this, we shall have the best, fullest, clearest, and noblest knowledge that a man can have, and also the purest, noblest desire. It's a very interesting. Have the purest, noblest, most sublime desire. Sri Ramakrishna, in some context, says, if you want to have an aim, a supreme motive, and if you sublimate your motives, have the best and noblest of motives. That is realization of God, spiritual unfoldment, etc. Some people, of course, in their own peculiar logic, if desire is bad, then don't you think a desire for spiritual liberation also is bad? So we must not have that desire. Many people think that that desire for liberation is not good because any kind of desire is bad. But the psychological explanation is a high desire, a noble desire, a sublime, a spiritually elevating motive or ideal, a sense of goal in life, removes all other undesirable desires, undesirable motives. You can put all these together and have one great, grand, noble, supreme spiritual goal. It is not selfishness. Or if you want to use the word selfishness, you have to use the word capital letter S. It is the Atman-oriented, the spirituality-oriented selfishness. Because that takes away all material desires. That's why when we do this, we shall have the best, fullest, clearest and noblest knowledge that a man can have, and also the purest and noblest desire. The author of Theologia Germanica. Very psychological suggestion. So have a high aim, a noble, a spiritually elevating, sublimating ideal of life. That's the idea behind. Eckhart says, my union with God, for I cannot rest in anything that was less than God. That is Eckhart, mystic. So, if you consider that you want a desire, then sublimate that desire and give it a spiritual orientation, because that will help us from the clutches of lower desires, lower ideas. Many great scientists and thinkers, even captains of industry, who worked all their life to succeed in business, later graduated towards some higher spiritual motive. You can find in the lives of many great philanthropists, captains of industry, many prominent people, who did not bother much about spiritual values or leading a spiritual life during the early part of their career, but worked very hard to succeed in material life. made a lot of money and achieved great success. But then at the next stage, they gradually evolve the next higher level, that is spiritual motive. So they start investing money for spreading education, for helping people, homeless people, and sometimes fighting for the financing institutions and organizations which fight the evils of poverty, illiteracy, and sometimes contagious diseases in third world countries. You can find many such great men. So there is always an evolution even in our desire. So an intense desire for something grand, holy, and great as the effect of removing all the lower desires, and it helps us to go beyond the clutches of lower desires. That's a right royal path leading to spiritual liberation. That's what Buddha also said. Trishna, when he used the word Trishna, when he emphasized that we should go beyond Trishna, what he meant was that we should go beyond the lower desires. That's the idea behind it. So they say, Nirmamo Nirahankara Sashanti Madhigachati. So one should be completely free from desire, then hankering, selfishness, and egotism. That is the characteristic of a spiritually evolved person. Now we will come to the last verse. We will conclude the text here. Tomorrow we will continue the discussion. But the last verse is very important because these four verses, 69, 70, 71, 72, are more or less interrelated. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nainam Prapya Vimukhyadi Sthitvasyam Antakale Abhi Brahma Nirvanam Prichyati. This state, Brahmi Sthiti, means, literally, technically it means a state in which one identifies oneself with Brahman, the ultimate reality. So, Esha yathokta Brahmi Brahmani Bhava Iyam Sthiti Sarvam Karma Sanyasya Brahmarupena Eva Avasthanam Iti Eva. The highest state of experience, not of conviction. But there are many important practical spiritual ideas involved in this. So when a spiritual seeker reaches the highest level of his spiritual evolution, he becomes fully established in Brahman. And he goes beyond all the bondages created by karma, obligations, duties. Not that he runs away from them, but he goes beyond the influence, the clutches, the rigidity of selfish activities. That's the idea behind. And here, the idea is this: Shankara Acharya says, when a person reaches this state, at the flag end of his life, Sthitva Asyam Sthito Brahmyam Yathoktayam Antakale Api Ante Vayasi Api Brahma Nirvanam Brahma Nirbhuti Moksham Prichyati Gacchati. The idea is this. So the meaning is this: at the end of our life, if you can reach this state, then there will be no rebirth. The transmigratory cycle comes to an end. The cycle comes to an end. There will be no more samsara, no more misery of birth, activities, sorrows, sufferings, and then death and rebirth. This cycle comes to an end if the spiritual seeker gets his experience at the flag end of his life. Then he makes an interesting statement. Suppose a spiritual seeker who is wise enough to start his spiritual journey at an earlier stage, before it is too late, before he becomes or she becomes too old. how wonderfully more beneficial it will be. That is the idea behind. Kimu vaktavyam brahmacharyadeva sanyasya yavat jivam yo brahmani eva avadishtati sa brahmanirvanam pritchati. Then what to speak of those blessed, fortunate people who start the spiritual journey when they are quite young? It will be much more beneficial. The point is, as I said last time, Vedanta tells you nothing is lost, you are never late. Whatever little you practice in this life will remain in your name, a kind of spiritual bank. Next life you can continue, you will be benefited by whatever little practice you have done in this life, spiritual practice. But it doesn't mean that we should procrastinate or we should postpone the beginning of the journey. It doesn't advocate any kind of complacency or spiritual lethargy or laziness. That's why Vedanta tells you, you can be liberated here in this life. The moment we become completely unselfish, that's the beginning of liberation. So it is possible right now in this world. We do not run away from obligations and duties. Vedanta actually helps you to confront the problems of daily life, duties and obligations much more intelligently. It doesn't advocate any kind of flight from the realities of life. Rather, it equips us to confront the realities of life much more intelligently and much more effectively and with great spiritual wisdom. That's the uniqueness of Vedanta. Now we will have interaction for half an hour. So you can open the discussion.
Nirmama originating.
Nirmama. See, mama means mine.
Mine.
For me or mine, both mean each other. So, such a spiritually liberated person will have no feeling that something belongs to him or something is his. Means total unselfishness. That's the idea behind.
Not cruelty. Impermanence, not
Yes,
cruelty.
in fact, all cruelties are associated with some kind of selfishness. Because when we go beyond selfish motives, when we become totally unselfish, we cannot be cruel, we cannot do anything evil. That's why Vivekananda defined religion as total unselfishness. That's the idea.
Swami, we were talking in our condo the other day about a mixed message that we receive, and we kind of came up with a theory, but like your confirmation. We're hearing both that, nothing is lost and you're never late,
Yes.
and
Yes.
be calm, just keep working. And then you hear, arise, awake, stop not until the goal is
That's
reached.
right.
And so
That's right, that's right.
one of our theories
Yes,
was the arise, awake more directed by Swamiji to his Indian brothers,
Oh.
and this relax, calm down, just focus, do your work, to the Americans because we are already a little wound up?
Yes. Well, if you interpret this as Swamiji's message, the Indian society, it has got two interpretations. One interpretation from a spiritual point of view. You should not forget your great spiritual legacy. You should be proud of it. You should preserve it. And the second interpretation is, Swamiji wanted Indian society to adopt, to assimilate some of the positive qualities, characteristics of Western civilization, like scientific, technological spirit, innovation, organization skill, work ethic, and so on. Swamiji was very much concerned about the economic and social backwardness of Indian society. So, you must work hard to spread education among the downtrodden and the women folk, and you must work hard for the secular material prosperity of the nation and so on. In America's context, perhaps the Western context, society was so steeped in material culture, material values, especially at that time. So you erase to the spiritual message of Vedanta that the Atman is within you, that the Brahman, the Atman, Supreme Consciousness within you. Realize this. That's the implication to the Western world. He wanted to give a highly focused spiritual message to the Western world. And when he turned to us Indians, on the one hand, Swamiji asked them to be proud of their ancient heritage and culture, at the same time to evolve, to build a strong and prosperous society, social structure, which can preserve his proud ancient spiritual heritage.
So a rise awake is really dedicated
Exactly.
to everybody.
Now coming to the other subject which I said, it has got a special implication in the context of Abrahamic religions, as I was interpreting.
Yes.
Interpreting the sixth verse. In Abrahamic religious tradition, I have met quite a few such thinking people who used to come to the New Temple. They're very much afraid. They're very much afraid of hell and what will happen at the end of death. It torments them. Sometimes it creates nightmares for them. So if they take to Vedanta, if they turn to some other non-Christian religious traditions, they will go to hell and such fears. So the idea is, in Abrahamic religions, life is only one. At the end of this life, either you will be admitted to heaven or you will be damned, which is in hell. So the fear of hellfire is a tormenting problem for people who are brought up in the Abrahamic tradition. But in Vedanta, you need not worry about it. If you could not lead a spiritual life, don't worry, start now. There is no need to be concerned, to worry about the past misdeeds, or could not go to church regularly, or could not pray, so anything like that. You can start a new spiritual life right now and today. And even if you start right now, it will produce its good results. If not in this life, next life, whatever little you have done in this life will become a spiritual bank deposit which will be beneficial to you in future life. So that's the idea. I hope it's clear?
Yes.
Swami, the concept of desires and attachment. I think about that, and for the most part, my desires is that other people be happy, that the things that need to be done are able to be done, and that, that we don't get unlucky and, go out and our tires become flat or something like that. So what is the threshold? Where does something become a desire that you would wish to avoid? And where are things that are just well-wishing? Just hoping for the best for all of us. Where is the separation?
Well, see, suppose a teacher or a student or any professional if he goes about his duties and responsibilities without much selfish motive or anything. This attitude will help the person to evolve to a higher level, spiritual level. So we'll have a higher spiritual goal. That's why, as I said, if a person goes on doing good things without any selfish motive, slowly that person comes to Vedanta. Remember, Vedanta here, I don't mean by Vedanta society or the movement or an institution. Vedantic ideas, which can be found in all religious traditions. Anything which is universal, broad-minded, compassionate, or inclusive. You find this because unselfishness gradually makes a person spiritual. It's pure psychology, not necessarily spiritual philosophy. And unselfishness invariably leads to spirituality. Spirituality should be understood as different from formal religion. Spiritual outlook means broad-mindedness, universal, kind of humanistic, universal outlook, all this. Then at what point we leave behind our normal desires, good desires, and take a universal spiritual desire. So when we turn to spirituality, Vedanta, when we have a strong desire to study and discuss and learn about the broader, higher universal spiritual ideas, that's a gradual evolution. We can't say exactly at what point this line of demarcation should be drawn. It's difficult to say. But very often, in life, it's not that from one stage you just move to the next stage. It doesn't happen. It's so gradual and so natural. So we cannot draw a line of demarcation at any point. But gradually you find people who are given to doing good things, doing the duty to the best of their ability, leading a good life, practicing unselfishness, gradually evolving higher and higher spiritual ideas. This is what it's clear.
Swami, could you retranslate the verse that you quoted from Swami Gaudapada's works?
Oh, yes. The verse is this. Anadi Maya Suptaha Yatha Jiva Prabuddhide Ajam Anityam Aswapnam Dvedam Buddhide Tada. This is the verse. Gaudapada says, people who have no spiritual aspiration, they are in a state of deep slumber with regard to spiritual ideas. Now, and when that person awakes, immediately he realizes that he is that Atman, the supreme reality. Ajam means that Ajam actually means Sadvikara Atidam. Literally means unborn. Unborn means it is not born, so it never dies. It is eternal. Unborn means not non-existent. Unborn means something which is unborn and therefore which will never die, eternal. Because an eternal reality cannot be born. Birth means the transition from a state of non-existence to a state of existence. It's always remains. Ajam Anidram. Anidram means it completely devoid of ignorance. And it is far beyond the states of, 3 states of human experience, waking, dream and deep sleep states. And it is Advaita, one without a second. That reality suddenly dawns on him. Shankara Acharya in his commentary says, when a teacher tells such a spiritually dormant, unenlightened person, you are the all-pervading Atman, Tattwamasi. You are not this psychophysical mechanism, body-mind complex. Like all like creatures insects, all these come and go. You are not like them. Within you there is the Atman, the universal reality, the supreme consciousness. When this instruction comes from a teacher, that person suddenly opens his eyes. So it's not a new knowledge. The teacher helps him to rediscover his true nature. The teacher enables him to open his eyes and realize what he himself is, his own Swarupa, his own true nature is. This is what really happens when great teachers give instructions. When Swamiji instructed great students like Sister Nivedita and others, you might see, suddenly they felt a kind of upliftment when Sri Ramakrishna gave this knowledge to Swamiji. They didn't get any new knowledge from outside. Suddenly they woke up into a new awareness of their own true nature. So this Maya is sometimes, it's to Anadi. It has no beginning. No beginning doesn't mean it is eternal. It never really existed, so that it has no beginning. Yesterday we described this in the class. In a room which is semi-dark, you mistake a rope for a snake. Really it is not a snake. If somebody asks you, when was the snake born? The answer is the snake was never born because it was never the snake. So Maya really doesn't exist. But we realize that Maya really doesn't exist only when we go beyond Maya. When we are within Maya, Maya is not non-existent. The non-existent nature of Maya is realized only when you transcend it. Very often, we know the limitation, the real nature of something only when we transcend it. When we are within it, we don't understand its true nature. When we go beyond it, then we understand its true nature. So, people who have no spiritual aspirations are in a state of deep slumber. Slumber imposed upon Maya, which is without beginning. When that person suddenly opens his eyes or her eyes, he realizes, he awakens into a new awareness as to what he really is. He realizes that he is not this body, he is that. That's it. It's clear.
Yes, and in the last verse 72 that we discussed, how is this Brahmi state different from complete realization?
Brahmi state, that we have not finished that. We will discuss this tomorrow. Brahmi state, in a state in which that spiritual seeker, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, that experience. That is Brahmi state. That is the final realization. After that realization, if he dies, if he or she dies, that person gets merged in Brahman. There is no rebirth for him. We have not finished that verse. We will take it because it needs a lot more explanation. So we have not completed that. So we'll conclude now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.